Being recorded. Oh, see, it takes a team, really takes a team.
Megan, the way the picture is behind you, it looks like you have a flower in your hair.
That's hysterical.
Right behind your ear.
Blair, do you want us to just mute and take our pictures off during your presentation?
You don't have to take your video off, but right now I have on my cell phone, it's 6701. So if everyone could mute themselves, and we'll get started. And then the presenters, you can unmute yourself when when it's your turn to speak. I'd like to welcome everyone here to Mountain Lakes Affordable Housing Advisory Committee's presentation on the Accessory Apartment Program in Mountain Lakes, and what is this and why are we doing it? And hopefully we can answer your questions in an hour. And if we can't, we are committed to staying a little bit after the hour to answer questions. And as I said, if you caught me before, we'll be holding these again. I'd like to introduce our presenters tonight. And first we have Cynthia Corman. She's been a Mountain Lakes Borough Council member since 2017. And since then has focused helping Mountain Lakes address affordable housing the Mountain Lakes way. Cynthia chaired the Accessory Apartment Subcommittee of the AHAC, we affectionately call ourselves, Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, which spent 9 months looking at other towns' programs and working through details for our own, first within the sub, then within AHAC, and finally with Borough Council. So a lot of work has been done on this program. Cynthia is a small business owner and has lived in Mountain Lakes for over 20 years with her family of 5. We have Randy Gottesman, who's president of Community Grants, Planning and Housing. And we affectionately say CGP&H. And his company is currently serving as Mountain Lakes Accessory Apartment Administrator. Randy has been an urban planner, a grant writer, and affordable housing expert after attaining his master's degree in city and regional planning in 1981. And he put in brackets how many years ago, it was a long time, but that means he's got a lot of experience. And he enjoys running his 35-person company dedicated to meeting the company's mission of enriching communities to improve lives. Robert Ryan is a CPA with 28 years of tax accounting experience with offices in Andover and in Mountain Lakes. His office has been in Mountain Lakes. He's been here for 18 years. And myself, I'd like to welcome you all. My name is Blair Schleicher Wilson. I've been a resident for Mountain Lakes, for 35 years. I've raised 4 kids and 3 grandchildren here. I'm a 16-year veteran of the Mountain Lakes Borough Council, and I serve both as deputy mayor and mayor. Professionally, I'm the CEO of Mars Habitat for Humanity, and I have 25 years of experience in the affordable housing sector. I have chaired the Mountain Lakes Affordable Housing Advisory Committee since 2015. And as Cynthia said in her, in her introduction, that there's been a lot of work done to get us to this point. And I just want to thank all of our committee members who got us here. Our attorney, Bob Oosdijk, is on the line with us to, hopefully if there's some questions before he has to leave, he'll be able to answer them. So with that, we are going to do a little background in the program overview, the benefits of an accessory apartment program. Then Rob is going to talk about the tax benefits of a rental property. Randy's going to talk about how an accessory apartment program works, and then we'll have Q&A. So what I'd like you to do is hold your questions, so write them down for the Q&A. And then we'll hopefully we'll be able to move through this, a little quickly until we can get to that point. So I am going to give you a little presentation because there's nothing better than looking at something other than at least this face as we move forward. This is a presentation that we gave to the Borough Council in September. It's been a little bit modified for this, for the purposes here, but I think it's really important that everyone understand how we got here. So quickly, Mountain Lakes amended its fair share plan, the master plan. Let me just do something here. And adopted the housing element of the master plan in 2019. The court determined that Mountain Lakes has a realistic development potential, or what we call RDP, of 17 units. As part of those 17 units, we have planned for 5 accessory apartments that are proposed in that third round RDP. And we feel, and this came from lots of study from the committee, that the accessory apartment program and adding that is a thoughtful and non-disruptive means for the borough to meet its affordable housing requirement, because we don't have to build, not right now. And you'll hear more about that. Here's a little pie for those 17 units. And you can see the Legacy, which is over on Fanny Road. There were 2 units there. Enclave, which is down a little bit off of the corner of Fanny and oh no, I think I'm wrong. Enclave is over by off of 46 Intervale, where we currently have a condo association there. There are 6 units there. This new Sunrise coming on line in September will have 4 beds, and then you can see the 5 accessory apartments. So that's where we get the 17 units. So who needs affordable housing? And I've worked in this for a long time in Morris County, and people would ask. I had a council member one time ask me about it. And when he was telling me his daughter graduated from a name brand college, and guess what she was doing? She was a curator in a nonprofit museum, not making a lot of money. And when he told me she was making like $35,000, I said, guess what? Your daughter qualifies for affordable housing. So there's a misnomer about the programs that those of us, this is not homeless housing. This is housing for folks who are that are in our community, people we need. Your library folks, art and design, entertainment, healthcare, support, you know, the woman or the man who's taking care of your loved one, food preparation, your DPW folks, building and grounds maintenance, and so on. This presentation, by the way, will be on the borough website. So, you know, as we go forward. And whoever, when you first join, please mute yourself. Thank you. What is an accessory apartment program? An accessory apartment is defined as a self-contained residential dwelling with a kitchen, sanitary facilities, sleeping quarters, and a private entrance, which is within an existing home or in a separate existing structure. So it has to have those things. A kitchen, you know, some kind of cooking facility, sanitary, you know, a toilet, sink, and sleeping quarters with a private entrance. So in Mountain Lakes, these are your carriage houses, your mother-in-law quarters. Maybe there's a small rental unit within a single family home that has a separate unit. Maybe it's an above the garage apartment in either an attached or detached garage. So what is the affordable accessory apartment program? This is where we will deed restrict, or the borough will deed restrict that property, the property for 10 years. And it's subject to all the affordability controls in marketing that unit, in the rental of the unit, and the tenant income qualifications. Now, I know you're gonna have a lot of questions on this, so please write them down. And as Randy goes through this later on the presentation, more and more of the answers, I hope, will be apparent, but we'll be here to answer questions. Cynthia will talk more about the benefits, but basically, if you think of it, it's great to provide extra income to assist in mitigating the increases of the cost of living. Mountain Lake's plan is by January of 2025 that we've identified and issued COs for 5 affordable accessory apartments in the borough. So that's our goal. And the state, other municipalities are watching us because this is a great way to provide for that much needed housing for the folks that are already living and working right here in our communities. So now Cynthia is going to talk a little bit about the benefits of an accessory apartment program. Cynthia?
Thank you. So for property owners in town, there are a whole bunch of benefits to doing this. A big one is that the residential zones in Mountain Lakes are really single household residences. And whereas basically if folks rent apartments now within their single family property, that's not a legal thing to do. There are some grandfathered exceptions, but for the most part, that's not something that's allowed in our town. This gives the opportunity to change that. So these 5 units will be perfectly legal units. We recognize that there are some properties in town where there are renters right now. And, we worked really long and hard on this program to try and accommodate as much as we could. And, current renters, what we've learned is that if a property owner participates in this program and has a current renter, that current renter will be able to stay. And we'll talk a little more about that later on. Another benefit to the property owner is that this creates future housing options. So by having an apartment in an accessory apartment on your property, you may have a renter today, and then over time you may want to transition into living in that unit yourself, and having adult children moving in with you. So it really gives a lot of flexibility to a single family home. Of course, providing rental income is a big asset. For the first 10 years, the rental income would be limited to what is affordable. And later on in the presentation, you'll see that that's not as low a rental income as you might think. So for the 10 years of the deed restriction, the amount that you can rent for is controlled. But then after 10 years, our town's program will allow the property to go to market rate. And so that's a really big asset, because if 10 years down the road, renting 1,000 square feet would bring your household, $2,500 a month, that will be perfectly legitimate, whereas now that's not the case. So, next slide. Thanks. Other benefits to the property owner, the borough recognizes that there are costs to renting an accessory apartment. And so the borough is providing a $5,000 stipend. The borough is not going to get into details of how you're spending that $5,000. It's basically, a $5,000 stipend as a thank you for doing this with the borough. A big benefit of the program is that it makes it easy to find credentialed tenants, because one of the things that happens is CGP&H, which is our affordable housing accessory apartments administrator, and Randy being the owner of that company, they handle pre-qualifying tenants, and they will provide you with potential tenants to meet with, who have been credentialed, cleared for credit worthiness. And, Randy can talk more about what the credentialing process is, but, you would not have to worry for those 10 years and longer. If you decide to stay in the program, you would not have to worry about finding tenants. Having an accessory apartment allows a homeowner to comfortably stay in their home if it's a home that's larger than what they need, and to get rental income to offset maintenance expenses. And tenants can also provide additional security. So if perhaps you're a homeowner whose kids have grown up and left, and you do a lot of traveling, if you have room for an accessory apartment, you would have somebody on your property, which can provide security versus having a frequently empty home. And the accessory apartment would add value to your home and offer tax benefits, which Rob will talk about in a few minutes. So the accessory apartment also benefits the borough because it lets the borough meet its affordable housing obligations without overdevelopment. We don't have to put in high density housing at market rates to get, to get a few affordables. This helps us avoid overdevelopment. It provides affordable housing to those that want to live closer to where they work. They might not have a high enough income to afford a Mountain Lakes home or even a home in a neighboring community, and really just want to be closer to where they work. It enriches the community with people like artists, caregivers, and others who may have lower paying jobs, and diversifies the housing stock, creating options for young professionals, empty nesters, and seniors aging in place. And it helps to meet the growing need for affordable housing. And now Rob, who is a CPA with a business in Mountain Lakes, is going to talk about the tax benefits of having an accessory apartment.
So I could probably talk a good hour just on this subject, but I'm gonna give the 10 minutes brief overview. So basically, real quick, rental income. A lot of people say it acts like an annuity. You're guaranteed this monthly income as long as you have your tenant, and you're just gonna get that monthly income, which really works just like an annuity, which is great for the landlord. The nice thing too is you pay taxes on your net rental income, which means after all of your expenses, you pay taxes on that net number. There's two basically major expenses here in categories: prorated expenses, or sometimes they're called indirect, and then you have your direct expenses. The difference between the two is the prorated expenses are expenses that would happen that cover the whole property. So for instance, the real estate taxes. The real estate taxes are on the whole property. But now, if you're using 20% of that property for rental, you'd be able to take 20% of your real estate taxes against your rental income. So your mortgage interest, the homeowner's insurance, utilities, repairs and maintenance, and that goes for anything that the tenant would use that you would use also. For instance, your driveway. If your tenant's parking there and you're parking there, you get the driveway resurfaced. Normally, that's not a tax deductible expense to the homeowner. However, 20% of it would be able to be deducted against that rental income. So there's a lot of prorated expenses here that can go against that rental income, which would help bring it down as far as the taxability goes. Then you have your direct expenses. Now, these expenses would be expenses that are directly related to your rental property. So if there's a repair, so let's say you have a carriage house, for instance, if there's a repair on that roof, that goes directly to the rental property. Anything on that carriage house, if you're renting it, would be an expense that would go against all that rental income. So you could be getting these monthly rental income checks, and then at the end of the day, the end of the year, when you put this all together, your taxability is going to be a lot lower than what you received in gross rents. The other big item is depreciation. Now, depreciation is an expense, but it's not a cash or a monetary expense. You get to depreciate part of that building or a carriage house, whichever you're doing. You get to depreciate the value of that building, and you do it for 27.5 years. So that depreciation expense will also come up your gross rental income. And then any other expense, supplies that you do for that rental property would go against the rental income. So if you're taking $2,000 a month of rental income, and that's $24,000, you'll be amazed when you start adding up these expenses that all of a sudden, with the depreciation, you net $5,000, and that's what you're paying tax on. but yet in your pocket, you might have netted 8 or 9,000 because of the depreciation and other expenses that you're able to take. The other big advantage here too is whether or not you can get past your SALT deduction and itemized deductions, and also whether you take the standard deduction or you itemize. If you itemize and you can't take all of your real estate taxes because of what we call SALT, which is your state and local income taxes, they're limited to the $10,000. Well, now what happens is you can take some of your real estate taxes that you couldn't put on your itemized, and now you move them against this rental income. So now you're getting that extra benefit of using some of that real estate tax that was lost due to the SALT limitations. The other item is if you can itemize, let's say you take the standard deduction, a married couple, it's $24,600. You might be taking that standard deduction because it's higher than your itemized. Well, now you get the benefit of taking the standard deduction, but also getting some of the mortgage interest and real estate taxes over to your Schedule E, which is against your rental income. So you're getting the benefit of still taking your standard deduction and still getting some of these deductions that were lost because you can't itemize. Now, the reporting requirements for your rental property, it's a one-page form. It's called the Schedule E, and it goes as part of your individual tax return. So the reporting requirement, it's not like you have to do a whole separate business return. It's just a one-page form, and that's all there is to it. That's about the overview.
Thank you, Rob. I'm sure people will have a lot of questions. And I'd like to ask Randy, I don't know why it's not advancing. There we go. Randy, to talk a little bit about the highlights of the program, how the program works.
Yes, happy to do that. Good evening, everybody. The accessory apartment highlights include, it's very important for all homeowners to know that the borough's initial focus will be on properties that currently possess existing accessory apartments. And if you fall into that category, it's very important for you, if you have any interest, to give us a call, talk things through, and get your application in as soon as possible, because the borough's ordinance caps participation at only 5 units for the next 5-year period. More importantly, perhaps, is on a first come, first served basis, you'll be able to choose whether you want a higher rent tenant, which here is called moderate income, or a lower rent tenant, which is the very low income unit. You get to choose. It's not, there's not going to be a random drawing or anything. So if we presume that everyone would want the higher rent tenant, that means the first 4 people get to make that choice and the 5th person does not. So, and we will track when applications are received. I'll talk more about applications later, but it's an incredibly simple application. It's not like filling out a mortgage or a mortgage refi. There's no request for personal financial information. It's all about the unit. You know, do you have insurance on the unit? You know, proof of insurance, proof that you own the unit, proof that you're current on your taxes and your mortgage payments. That's about it in terms of supporting documents. And then, like I said, the 2-page form should take literally minutes to fill out. So it is a simple process to begin, and then once you're in, and I do want to talk about this a little bit more later, but once you're in the process, then you know what? I'll go into more detail later. Let me go to the 3rd bullet. No, we'll go back, please. I just want to see if I didn't miss anything. Thank you. So, right, 3rd bullet. Each accessory apartment, it was mentioned before, but it's worth re-mentioning, has a 10-year deed restriction, which begins at the point that a income eligible person begins to reside in the unit or may already reside. The borough will provide a one-time subsidy, this was mentioned before, which is not required, but that was a proactive decision the borough made to not only help entice people, but to show appreciation. And that's why I think the committee calls it a thank you, which is very appropriate. Okay, next slide, please. More highlights. We are the borough's administrative agent. We will administer the process, which one of our primary roles in that is to find you appropriate tenants for your unit. The tenants must, of course, income qualify, and landlords, and you meet non-discriminatory criteria that the property owner is free to define. You get to choose, is smoking allowed? Are pets allowed? Is there a weight limit on pets? Those sorts of things. Anything that's not in violation of the Fair Housing Act or state or federal tenant landlord law is completely permissive. This is not a more restrictive program in any of those regards. The only restriction is the maximum rent that's allowed to be charged and the maximum income that the resident can be. You could even set credit scores, for example, as long as you're consistent from applicant to applicant, you could decide what a reasonable minimum credit score should be. So a lot of freedom for owners. That's important. I'll be emphasizing that again in a few minutes. If the current tenant does income qualify for the unit, which is maybe they will, maybe they won't, if you have an existing tenant, then the clock immediately starts ticking, which is advantageous. Your unit will immediately become an affordable unit. And by immediately, we mean after you fill out the 2-page form and the deed restriction gets filed, but then the clock would begin ticking. And then of course, if the current tenant does not income qualify, that is not a problem. That just means you have to delay when the clock can start ticking, but you can still enter into the deed restriction and guarantee that you'll be one of the 4 or 5 owners that get this long-term benefit. And like it was said before, not only is there the 10-year benefit and the tax benefits, but there's also the post 10-year benefit and all the different choices and options that gives you over the years. If any improvements are required, we don't get involved. You just do what you would normally do. To anything that requires a permit, you will get a permit for, and you'll get a C of O, and you're good to go. Okay, next slide, please. As stated before, if you have current tenants, that is not a problem. You could join the program, and if you don't income qualify, as said before, you just have to be a little patient, and then the clock will start when that tenant leaves. But it's a win-win. At the end of the 10-year deed restriction, the property owner can keep the unit as affordable, or you could start renting it at that point at market rates as soon as the unit becomes vacated. And even if the unit doesn't, I don't want to go too into details, but if the income eligible person at the end of 10 years is no longer income eligible, you're even allowed to raise the rent on that person because they can now afford more. Next slide, please. So interested homeowners, and I hope there are many, will be provided with an application, that simple application I was telling you about. And basically you agree to restrict the apartment to affordable households with the exclusion of your existing resident if they happen to not be income eligible. And that you'll follow the guidelines and execute a deed restriction for a period of at least 10 years. Next slide, please. Okay, so people were talking before about the different incomes, and I love that slide that shows all the different types of professions that earn different monies, and it's all true, and there's probably many hundreds of other types of jobs that fit these categories as well, that help run our community, and this gives them more housing choices. So as you can see, a 1 or 2 person moderate income household would have to have a maximum income of about 52,000 in a 1 person household and about 59,000 for a 2 person household. And I might as well say about, because every year this changes, and these are 2020 numbers. I obviously would have put 2021 up, but they're not available yet. They're never available until mid-April to mid-May of every year. So this will go up. Only during the recession did it not go up at all. It goes up basically with the CPI, and there's a 9%. I believe it's a 9% a year maximum increase, and that would be in crazy inflationary times. But they do anticipate that, so they do allow for that as well. The one very low income unit, you could see it's a little less than half the income of the moderate income households. Okay, next slide. Now the permitted rents, we call them maximum permitted rents because you could always charge less. No one, that's not against the rules. Just the maximum is the maximum. So for the 4 moderate income units, if depending on the size unit, and it really could be any size. I mean, it's typical to be 1 bedroom or studio 1 bedroom really, but it depends on the layout of the unit. And basically these ranges, let's take a 1 bedroom moderate. The range is 1,030 right now to 1,187. It's the exact rent is highly dependent on utilities. First of all, what utilities are being used to heat the unit and provide hot water and that sort of thing, and who is agreeing to pay. And the landlord decides, the owner, you decide. If you decide to pay, if it's more convenient, then you're going to come closer or hit the highest rent amount. If you want to separately meter or whatever, and have or propane or whatever the case may be, and have the tenant pay completely, it'll be closer to the lower end of the number. And so those are the rents, as you could see. And I believe it was stated that this will be available online. So we could leave this at that and go to the next slide. Or is there another slide?
I think that's it.
Well, then I'd like to take a few minutes, if I could, to do sort of a 2-minute summary drill of the steps that are involved. And my 2 minutes will probably be more like 4, if you'll bear with me.
Well, I'll
But
tell you, Randy, we are, but for time-wise, we're doing really well.
okay,
No, folks, so you will want to expand, and I think maybe if Rob wants to, we can do that and leave plenty of time for Q&A.
okay, great. So I want to walk you now through how a typical unit gets developed, step by step. Well, first, you'll need to know that if you own an existing accessory apartment, that you are the borough's priority for funding under this program. Second, you need to know that this program is first come, first served. So if you want to be able to charge the highest rent, it's best to apply immediately, because there's only 4 units in the higher rent range. Third, you'll need to fill out a basic 2-page application and attach home-related information. Like I said before, not personal financial information. Fourth, if your unit is up to code, you are basically ready to proceed. If the unit needs some work, simply get that done, and your spot will be held for you for a reasonable period of time, as long as progress is being made. Fifth, enter into a deed restriction. There's an intermediate step actually where I review the application, I submit it to the municipal attorney. The attorney and I both deem it complete, and then it goes to council for resolution, and that's how the attorney gets authorized to help execute a deed restriction, and the homeowner receives the $5,000. Sixth, we income qualify your existing tenant if you have one. If they meet all the criteria, the 10-year clock starts ticking. Seventh, you enter into a contract with CGP&H to affirmatively market your unit. We'll do your annual lease reviews, and we'll income qualify for you when vacancies arise. I might add here that there should really never be a need to hire a rental agent or a real estate agent to rent your unit, because all the people will be coming off our lists. In most municipalities, our lists are well over way more than the supply of units. So demand is never a problem, ever. So and your $5,000 was at least in part intended to go towards covering these costs. I do want to also add that the turnover rate is actually less than market rate units, because people are smart and they know they're getting a very good value, a good deal, and they know that they hit the lottery by getting this. This is a big wait list thing. You know, they may have way less than 1 in 100 chance of getting into your unit. So you're going to have a good tenant. Another thing I wanted to say, even though it's not my number 7, I think it's one of my prior numbers, is when we income certify the person, we're income certifying for the owner's benefit as well, to make sure that they can afford to pay your rent. And so we need to income certify that their income's not too high, but we also income certify that their income's not too low. And as someone said before, this is, you know, that mid-range type of housing, not the lowest of affordable housing, and not Section 8. Number 8, you have the power to set much of your own tenant screening criteria. If you're new to being a landlord, but we think you won't be, because there's only 5 units available, and the priority is for people that are currently landlords. But if you need any advice, we can give you that advice and recommend some screening tenant criteria. But the decision is always the owner's, as long as it's compliant with Fair Housing Act and other standard tenant landlord rules. 9th, we send you a shared spreadsheet on that's in the clouds, so that you and we can both track status as applicants come to visit your unit. They apply. Once you get a credit score on someone, the credit score is put on there, all the information. We could both be in the file at the same time, and it's much better than the old way of sending Excel spreadsheets back and forth. 10, after you show the unit, you can take an application fee if the parties seems interested, run their credit report. Again, we could help you with that, but I presume many of you know how to do this. And then you add that to the spreadsheet. Even if you're ready to sign with them, Do not execute the lease at that time. There's 2 more steps. 11, the tenant that you want is then invited by us to submit a full application if you tell us that you want them. That means they have to submit supporting documentation to prove all of their previous statements are accurate or sufficiently accurate that it doesn't affect their eligibility. Normally that takes about 1 week. They may be granted an additional week if needed. There's always extenuating circumstances, but we don't let that go on and on. With the length of our waiting list, it's usually more efficient to just move on. CGP&H notifies you, the owner, once that applicant is certified as income qualified. And then the last step, the owner executes a lease with the certified applicant and kindly emails us a copy of that lease. So I thought that was my 2-minute, 5-minute drill. Okay.
And that's perfect. And I will add that we have an FAQ document that the committee has created. I believe it's on our website. If not, I will put it up there. It has the questions, many of the questions that Randy just went over. Actually, all of us in the presentation have gone over with answers. So, and it's a living document. So as questions come up, we try to get it on that document for you. Rob, do you have anything you'd like to add to the tax discussion before I open it up for questions?
I mean, the only thing I would explain a little more, go into a little more depth, is the benefit of the people that are losing out on their real estate taxes due to that SALT limitation. Because almost all of us in New Jersey will hit that $10,000 just in our real estate taxes alone. That SALT limitation is all of your state and local. So it's your New Jersey withholding tax, it's your real estate taxes, it's everything on your W-2 as far as the SUI and the disability. So what you're losing there, because you can only do 10,000, and again, you're going to hit it just alone in your real estate taxes in New Jersey, most of us, at least now you can get some of that over to the Schedule E rental property. And the same thing if, for instance, if realistically your home's paid off or you have no mortgage, you're probably using the standard deduction. So the real estate taxes aren't helping you out anymore either because you're using that standard deduction. But now you will get some of that over against the rental property. So that's one of the big areas of having the rental.
That's really helpful. And thank you, Rob, and thank you, Cynthia and Randy, for putting this together. And I'm going to give a shout out to Sue Ann Sylvester. She created the wonderful flyer that was in everybody's mailboxes last week. And thank you to Sue Ann, our resident talented marketing professional. I'd like to open it up for any questions anyone has. And if you have one, there's a little, if you look at the bottom of your screen, a little reactions button. You can just press the hand so I can see it, or raise your hand, or you can put your questions in the chat box. You can put it to all, and we'll answer it that way. Questions? Kara, I know you have a question. Come on, you can start out.
No, I was honored to be a part of this group to help come up with accessory apartments and work through the COA issues in Mountain Lakes, where I run my business. And as such, I don't feel like I have any questions at this time, but it's just been such an honor.
Very good, very good. I'd like to ask Rob the question about the rental property. Does the homeowner, and I guess this also is a general, Bob Uzike, our attorney, had to step away, but this might be a question also for you, Kara. Does the homeowner have to live in their home? So let's say they own the home, maybe they're only there 6 months, they go south, and they have they have the rental person in there. How, are the rules still the same in terms of tax benefits?
Well, it's to be able to The rental side of it, it doesn't matter on the rental side. The rental side is going to be on your Schedule E, whether you're in that house for 2 months out of the year or 12 months out of the year. So the rental side is going to be on your Schedule E with the income and expenses. So that part of it doesn't matter. So it doesn't really matter if it's you're here 2 months and you're somewhere else, or vice versa. You're up here for 8 months and you take 3 months and you go down south. All those expenses that are incurred on that house, whether they're prorated or directly related to the rental, that's going to be the same.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'll ask a question. I think this is one of our frequently asked questions, but this way, I can confirm our shared understanding. 10 years can be a long time. So, somebody might do an accessory apartment, this year, and then 5 years down the road, perhaps have a need to move out of their home where they have a renter because if they have a family need across the country, or one of many reasons why they might unexpectedly have a need to move out of their home. Is it correct that it's perfectly fine to rent the other part of the home? So there would essentially be 2 rental units in a home. Am I correct that that's not really a problem? That is something that would be allowed, again, only for these 5 units that we're, these 5 properties that we're appreciated, we as a town are appreciating because it helps us meet our affordable housing obligations.
Randy, do you want to?
I think that's more of a legal question. And so I would defer to the attorneys. I don't know if Kara's prepared to weigh in, or we leave that to the municipal attorney.
Although I think the municipal attorney would be in a better position to answer this question, I think it depends on what your ordinances allow in the municipality, whether that allows folks to rent their units. I know some places have, some very strict rental rules with regards to private residences. And I'm not sure about Mountain Lake specifically, whether or not you can rent out your home. The part that you reside in. This purpose of this is because there are, folks who are presently renting out portions of their home, and whether or not that is a part of it. I saw a question in the chat about, what's it called? About being able to, whether this is a community-wide zoning change. And I'm not necessarily sure that it is. It just had been that some folks were renting these places out, and that wasn't necessarily a part of what was permissible. And
Okay, I can answer that question.
Cynthia, I'll let you do it.
Yeah, no, this is, so I see the question, does this program constitute a community-wide zoning change? The answer to that is yes, for the residential zones, all of the residential zones, and the Midvale Market area. So under the borough's accessory apartments ordinance, those are the 2 zone types where this is authorized. So there's no need to go through a variance process, property by property. If you just go through the application process.
Yeah.
And by the way, when I asked that question about can you rent out your space, I had actually previously asked our borough attorney about that, and we would need him to confirm, but my recollection is that he said that that would be allowable.
I will add that I don't know of any affordable housing problem with that. So that's why I deferred to the municipal attorney, because it's not an affordable housing issue as far as I'm concerned.
And it's not uncommon for people to rent their properties now. There are a lot of rental homes in Mountain Lakes. What we have though is we have the single household rule. And so what this allows is an exception to the single household rule.
And so moving on, we have a great question from Mike. And I'm going to let Randy answer this as the expert. He'd like to have you define deed restricted.
Right,
There a person that can perform a walkthrough of a potential accessory apartment to make
right.
sure it would meet all this. So he's got 2 questions in there.
All right, both questions are very good. Deed restriction or deed restricted property is one where the owner agrees to restrict the rents to some predetermined income eligibility. In other words, you agree to make your unit affordable to moderate income 1-person households or 2-person households for the duration of the term of the deed restriction. I wanted to add before this question helps me add something I left out, is that typically in New Jersey, deed restrictions always last 30 years. This is the one program that's only 10 years. So I think there was some real understanding by the creators of this regulation in the rules that this is someone's individual private single family home. And while of course there's some challenge to looking ahead 10 years, we'd all agree it's impossible to look ahead 30 years, as an individual homeowner and say, oh, I know what I'll be doing, And so I think there was some sensitivity to that because the borough gets the same exact full credit for a 10-year deed restriction as for a 30. So it's, I just wanted to put that out there that this is a good deal on so many levels, because normally every other deed restriction that an owner signs, even people that purchase a single affordable unit, like a Habitat for Humanity unit, they're generally signing a 30-year deed restriction.
Or more.
And this is only 10. The second part of that question is there a person that could perform a walkthrough, make sure it would meet all city, county, state codes like fire? What we do in other municipalities is, and I have to be honest, I did not broach this with Mountain Lakes, is the local code official will walk through. And I see Cynthia nodding her head. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that. You're on mute.
Yeah, that's my understanding of the process is if one were to apply, call to the borough manager, and then, you would have to get a certificate of occupancy. And so by asking for a certificate of occupancy, and Sue Ann, maybe you have experience with this sort of thing with getting a C of O. When you ask for a certificate of occupancy, is it correct that there's a walkthrough? And then if there's something that prevents the issuance of the certificate of occupancy, then you would hear about it then.
Right. Well, for the typical CO, it's just going to be your smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, and your fire extinguishers. I think this is going to be a little more extensive because there's going to be some fire rated requirements in terms of doors and installation. If it's a second floor unit, there's going to have to be some. I think Kara's up to on this, right? Didn't we have this discussion in our meeting before?
Yeah, exactly. You definitely have to follow all of the codes and the rules of the ordinances that are set forth. It's for everybody's safety too. There's no reason to not want to make sure that your fire is up to code and you've had all the proper inspections. Your insurance company will want you to have the same all nailed down. So it's simple. The process isn't hard. You schedule and you get it done.
And Randy, it's correct to say you do not get involved. Your organization does not get involved in that aspect of it. That's really to our construction official.
That is correct. We have inspectors on staff that are capable, but generally we use them for a housing rehabilitation program that we run in a few dozen towns, and not for the accessory apartment programs. Yeah.
Randy, there's another question and it's also on our FAQ regarding, what happens when a seller, that we kind of addressed this a little bit before. Let's see what it's, I'll ask the question directly. Can a new owner relinquish the restriction and program, or would a seller and subsequent buyer be bound by the 10-year window? And if not, is there a retroactive tax implication? So this is probably, maybe even Rob comes in on this. If we don't know the answer, we can get back to, to the person with an answer.
I'm comfortable saying that in my experience, it is, all parties are bound by the 10-year window, and there is no retroactive tax implication. It runs with the land. I have known one or two property owners that sold it with a deed restriction. It's almost like having a swimming pool. In some cases, people are going to like it more. In some places, in some cases, people say, I don't want that burden, so I liken it to the swimming pool. And so that's my experience. I'm not saying there isn't an exception somewhere out there. I haven't seen it. Yeah. I'm willing.
And
Okay.
I will say, in the discussions that we've had within the committee, our borough attorney has always said that no, the 10-year deed restriction is a 10-year deed restriction.
And that is why it's 10 years and not 30. So that, they're sort of saying, okay, you're going to get a lot of benefits from this as an owner. And obviously you're helping the community and people as well, paying it forward, or however you want to look at it. But we're asking you to make that 10-year commitment. And we're not asking you to make a 30-year commitment, because that would be too unreasonable.
And that's why the option of renting out the other part of the home is a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see the answer to that. I'm sure that'll go on the FAQ at some point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Mary Ellen is asking, what are the implications for homeowner insurance?
Randy, can the property owner require renter's insurance be acquired by the affordable renter?
Yes, that's permissive, and we recommend it. Yeah.
So the property owner does not have to cover the renter's insurance themselves.
Correct.
And I know that leases that my daughter has partaken of sometimes often require that they have renter's insurance. So that's
My
something that
daughters
can go
too.
into a lease.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't
Great.
understand what renter's insurance covers, by the way, and it's really important. Tenants really should want to have renter's insurance. Sometimes people try to avoid it, but renter's insurance covers all your personal property within the unit. And sometimes, if God forbid something goes wrong or whatever, a tree goes through and there's water damage or something, their personal property is not covered by the landlord's insurance, not covered by anything else. And it's very inexpensive. It can be bundled with your car insurance. And it's super easy to obtain. And I highly recommend it, whether your landlord puts it in there or not.
Agreed.
Well, that's great. And thank you for your questions and the answers from everyone. It's great to be able to answer questions now rather than get back to folks. But like I said, we're going to update that FAQ. It'll be up on the Borough website. This presentation will be there. And I was going to ask for more questions, and we have one that just came in. Does this create any issue for existing single-family residential mortgage loans in place?
Personally, I have not heard of that being a problem, but if there's a concern, I would suggest you check with your either attorney or your mortgage company. But yeah.
Thank you. Other questions? There's a lot of information here that, we know there's many residents that are renting out part of their homes and their unit would qualify. The difference here is that your home would be deed restricted for 10 years. And then there's a process by which to select your tenant, but you do have some controls over that in terms of, like Randy said, setting your criteria as long as it fits within the non-discriminatory list of things. We do plan to hold this again. And certainly after you've heard this and you kind of start thinking about stuff and you have other questions, the committee's information is on the website. You can always also email the borough manager, Mitchell Stern, certainly myself, Cynthia of Orgy Lane, who's also councilwoman. I'm sure she'd be happy to answer questions, although she's brand new on the committee. So there are all of us that certainly can answer or help find you the answer. But I thank you all. I thank you to Cynthia, to Rob, to Randy for helping us out here and giving this very informative presentation. And with that, I'd like to bid you all a very good night. And let's pray for a little warm weather. And hopefully we've got some folks who might raise their hand and participate in our program.
And Blair, I also, before we close, I want to say thank you to you for your leadership of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. It's been a stellar experience and the town owes you a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair.
Thank you,
for
Blair.
that. Thank you,
And a lot of
everyone.
work.
Bye. Thank you.
Night.
Good night.